There I am.
Every time. It almost brings tears to my eyes how awesome that video is.
It was a good labor. It was a good labor there.
Which labor of Hercules was it?
The 7th. Now, can you name it off the top of your head? Because I can't.
No, 100% no. I'm definitely a historian, but the 7 labors of Hercules is not something.
I was going to say I can't. I know
I can
that
look
there
it
were
up.
12 labors. They were 12.
12?
Yeah,
well, at least you knew. I thought it was 7 though. So there you go. We're both in the mix.
Yeah, see.
I know one of them wasn't one of them to fight the Hydra. That was one of them.
Yeah. Fight the Hydra, get the golden fleece.
The
apples of something or other.
The apples of discord or something.
Yeah, something
goofy. He had to fight like a lion too.
Yeah, like for the golden fleece.
Or no, that was the Hydra. The Hydra had the golden fleece, but he also had to fight like a lion or something. No, that was hanging on a tree. It wasn't on an animal, and he had to go fight the Hydra and cut off the heads, and it was a hot mess express for 100% stress. Anyways, what's up, everybody? Welcome back. We're live. I got a co-host this week. Aham last week. I'm this week. So
yeah, don't mind me and my breakdowns. You know, things happen. Sometimes you just gotta step away and be like,
listen, I took the reins of the show, and we rode into the sunset with Mithra. Mithra took us on a ride around the world, and I gave you guys some Nabatean amazement last week. This week, the Ebla Tablets, one of the most important finds in history, proving the Old Testament to be correct. Now, for those of you that think he's going to get religious, I can just tell it's a religious episode, I'm going to turn it off. No, but I am working on something in the future regarding religion, cooking something up, and I think you guys, well, some of you will be pleasantly surprised. The others might not be, and that's fine. It's not a big deal. It happens. Anyways, thank you for tuning in to this Uncanny Earth. As always, I am your host, Solomon, and with me is my co-host, Spider. And he was off last week, and he had some things he had to take care of, but he's back. The laptop's fixed, and we're back with a co-host. So, right. And listen, last week was a test run to see if I could handle the hour show. I did it, and I did it very well. So there'll be more of those in the
back too hard there.
I did it. I actually hurt my back, hurt my shoulder.
I left a mark.
I pulled a muscle. So, but yes, and also coming up on the 2nd of December, our very own Spider will be this guy. He'll be hosting the show without me. So what's he gonna do? You guys should tune in and check it out. You might see somebody in the comments that you know, but I don't know who that would be. But you should definitely tune in December 1st for the All Spider Show. It's going to be you know what's going to happen. It's going to be wacky. It's going to be zany. There's going to be like... I bet
that song's public domain, so I might even play it.
If you do that, I'll 100% not tune in. Just kids. Of course I'm going to tune in. So yes, you might get a little lovin's from your boy. So make sure you tune in. December. Let me make sure that's right. I think that's December 2nd here on this Uncanny Oit. Yes, December 2nd. Make sure you guys tune in. And yes, for those of you asking if we are going to have a Black Friday episode, yes, we are. We are 100% going to have a Black Friday episode about Black Friday and where it comes from and our experiences working on Black Friday. And we can.
Oh man, I'm glad. I don't do that no more.
And we can well, it's not as big as it used to be, really. Now the internet shopping has taken, people just buy it.
Yeah, Black Friday is on right now as far as sales go. Mm-hmm. I guarantee you every sale that you're going to see at Walmart on Black Friday is already there right now. Mm-hmm. And they're probably just going to be like, oh yeah, it's Black Friday, guys. And they've been running it for a week and they don't care.
I've been out on Black Friday sometimes. The last time I went out, seriously, Black Friday, I went to Sears. Yes, our old stomping ground before they closed. And there was nobody. And that's how you know it's bad, that if on Black Friday there is not a single soul in the store. So that's how I knew that it's about time. Anyways, tonight we're talking Ebla Tablets. And because my illustrious co-host, see, I can call him illustrious too. It's all good. Because my illustrious co-host decided that, you know what, I'm not going to upload this dad jokes fiasco tonight.
Literally a fit of rage.
I I think you should sing the dad jokes theme.
I could. It won't be as good as the whole choir because there's only one of me instead of three of me stacked all nicely. So I can't do my own harmonies.
I don't want to hear about the three
Not
of you
like
stacking
John,
nice.
Don,
No,
Rob.
no, no, no.
Full stop.
It's not that type of show.
But
you can check out our OnlyFans videos for that type of show. Right?
I don't have those videos. If you've got them, those are for you.
I do. I do. They're just pictures of me next to a fan.
I know.
And flans. Right. Yeah. And flans. Flans and fans. Only flans and only fans. That's right. That's right.
How about only crayons?
Like how about only vans?
Yeah.
You know. Only trans. Only trans missions. Only transmissions.
Either or, I guess. If you
wait, what? Okay, listen. We're getting off of the show. Sing the goddamn dad jokes theme already.
All right. I've had a bit of a cough lately, so
talk amongst yourselves.
It's time for dad
jokes.
See, it's okay. It's just
relaxed. I jumped in on it.
Good call with the harmonies there because it needs the harmonies.
It needs. I'm sorry if I didn't harmonize perfectly, but I had to, just do it off top of the dome.
It was on though. It was on. It wasn't like I wasn't gonna be like, oh, what is he doing? Oh,
he's butchering it. Right. All right, y'all. Who invented fractions? Who invented them? Henry the 1/4.
Well, that's the end of the show. See you later.
Hope you have a good weekend.
Now I can just leave. I can just cover up the camera and be like, hey.
Good. And I'll do the show by myself. I mean, I've done it before by myself.
Well, that makes us even.
Steven.
It's 1-1.
Yeah, because you've done one. I've done one. So there's a random insect on your microphone.
Is there?
100%.
Yeah, it's those little flies, man. Little flies,
man.
Little flies.
So, to get back on track, because you know how we go, we're going to get off track, off the rails, off the dome piece. Today we're talking about Ebla. Yes, Ebla, the civilization they did not think existed. They thought it was a lie. Now, what I want to do is we're going to do a little screen share because I want to show you where Ebla is. There we go. Oh, I got to screen share first. We are still working with the old. There it is.
While you're doing that, great news. Now that I'm not using my phone to stream this show and I'm using the laptop, I have access to screen shares. So who knows? Maybe I can start playing around with that too.
Oh no, I'm just mad. Is that good? Let's see what we got. Okay, so
there we go.
As you
it was there for a minute.
Yeah, it went. Well, what had happened was, the problem is, I got to have the screen up. There was a way I did this before, but so yeah, we're gonna try this again. Sorry, this is very not professional. I get it.
It was working for a minute there.
It 100% was, and it's being a sassy SOB that's making me very angry. I don't know why. Here it is. I'm just a goof. All right, there we go. We're back. Back in business.
Bango.
So here is Ebla right here. The beautiful place known as Ebla. They didn't think it existed. So this is the Syria region right here because it's in Syria. Here we have Sumeria just sitting over here with Kish and all the good stuff. Then we have Canaan.
In the whole world.
Yeah. We've got Canaan right here. So this area is a hotbed of Middle Eastern history, Middle Eastern lore, mythology, religion, all that. And so Ebla itself, mind you, pull up my notes. I got a whole PowerPoint presentation slide for this episode, so you guys won't see it. But I'm going to start. Get ready for my PowerPoint slide. It's only 52 slides. You'll be fine. You better take
looking
notes.
forward to a PowerPoint presentation tonight.
Oh, this one's fantastic, by the way. So what I'm going to start doing for our show is make a PowerPoint presentation, then use those PowerPoints at the different talks that I have next year, and I got a lot lined up. So
as much as I'm slamming that, it's actually a good idea. I'm going to slam it anyway because I have.
I mean, you would slam anything.
Wait a second. Wait, well.
That's the man who's saying some things and does.
Let's not bring some personal history into this. I'm a drink to that, though.
I'm also going to drink to that. Anyways, so the ancient city of Ebla itself was located in the Tel Mardik district, located between Hamath and Aleppo in northern Syria. You might know Aleppo as one of the places where there was some strong fighting back in, I believe, 2016. And that was a whole war that was going on, as there's always wars going on in the Middle East. But in 1968, archaeologist Paolo Mattea of the Roman University excavated a statue of the goddess Ishtar with an engraved king's name underneath. Now, it wouldn't be for, 6-7 years later, when in 1974, 42 clay tablets were found, and in 1975, 15,000 tablets were excavated at the site, and then a few years later, a total of 20,000 tablets were uncovered at the site. These tablets contained a variety of subjects: law, history, trade, incantations, geographic names, mythology, rituals offered to the gods, ranging from Enki and Enlil to Tiamat and Kish. And a key note here is that these tablets date back to 2300 BC, while Babylon doesn't come around until around 1894 BC. Not 1894 AD, because that would be not so long ago, but 1894 BC. And for those of you that don't know, and you might not know this, BC goes from high dates to low dates. That's where AD goes from 0 to 2022. So just something to know. I mean, most people know this, but if you don't, now you know this. I mean, it's common sense, but
it's contemporary with the Sumerians at the time, which is a pretty big deal, because 100%. As much as we've uncovered about Sumer and the people that lived there and the Akkadians, there's a lot of fragmentary stuff there. And this find corroborated a lot of the language that we know about from Sumeria. It was a huge boost in how we understood that language, because they had on these tablets the same kind of thing as the Rosetta Stone, very similar. They had decrees like trade between these different empires in multiple languages so that everybody could understand them. So very, very important find as a general historical thing about the entire region.
Upon discovery, the tablets in the city actually used a very ancient language in the Northwest Semitic group, previously unknown, and Professor Pettinato dubbed this language Paleo-Canaanite or Ancient Canaanite. And the language was closely akin to Hebrew and Phoenician. Now remember, Phoenician supposedly landed in the United States, and there was archaeological evidence of coins and things like that being found on the East Coast. So that tells you something right there, that these civilizations that we are learning about seem to get older and older and older as they keep finding these tablets at these places. So who knows what they're going to find next? Remember, folks, people said Troy didn't exist, that Troy was a myth and a legend, and then boom, they find it. So, and keep that for later, because there's another really interesting point on this bad boy. Now, the tablets themselves were actually written in a Sumerian script. Sumerian logograms were adapted to represent Akkadian words and symbols. And initially, 1,000 words were recovered in vocabulary lists. And these words were written in both Sumerian logograms and Eblic syllable type writing. Now, it's kind of funny, because here is this country And on the map we showed that that Ebla was far to the left, almost a port city or a port nation, if you will. And here was Sumeria just off to the right, just chilling. And there was interaction. There was interactions between the Akkadians, and there was different invasions that had happened. And the funny thing about the Eblaites is the fact that they were not a military type civilization. They were a trade civilization. Their business was business. It wasn't a military great empire, as to where the Akkadians were more of a military style empire. They went in, they conquered, they took land, they did what they had to do to survive, while the Eblites, all they did was say, you know what, let's get money, we'll build up a giant trade, because they're a port nation. Port nations can get more goods, and then they get it from wherever, and then it comes into the port, and then they distribute it throughout that area. So here's this port city, and you'll find this a lot in the Middle East, that port cities are very, very rich, and a lot of the other cities don't like that. They don't like the fact they're getting money, and they're more of a military nation, because they can't do that. They can't do what these other places can do. So you have that happening in places like the Akkadian Empire. You know, the funny thing about the Akkadians or Akkadians, I've heard it pronounced that way too, you know, however it's pronounced, is that they were a warlike country. Like, they're 100% a warlike nation.
They swooped in and they took over. Yes. When Sumer started to get problems with both its environment and its own kind of internal struggles, Akkad just came in and took everything. They absorbed the entirety of Sumerian culture into itself, and that's not small. That's not small stuff. That's huge. That's like somebody going into Egypt and just being like, okay, I'm going to take over your country, and not only that, I'm going to completely absorb everything you guys do into my country, and now you're part of Zimbabwe, or you're part of Botswana.
Remember that the Persians came in, and they took over, and there was many nations that came into Jerusalem, to Israel, and just straight said, okay, you're part of us now, and there's nothing you can do about it. You are us. I believe it was the man, I got on the tip of my tongue here too, because they were a big nation as well. Persia was one, because Persia was vast. It was a gigantic empire, military style, trade, you name it, they had it. They were a gigantic nation until they were broken down by Arabic culture. Islam came in, swooped in, conquered them, and Islam has remained the staple in Middle Eastern countries, which makes it kind of difficult for historians to go in and do research. A sad note here is that, you know, I think it was 3-4 years ago when ISIS ran into those museums and just destroyed everything, destroyed the Buddha statues, blew those up. You know, I could go on conspiracies and say that it was U.S. troops, because supposedly it was them, and they had you know, U.S. tattoos, and they matched them. I don't know how true that is. I'm just saying that was a conspiracy that was going on. But let's jump back into this thing here.
Getting better, if I can get my words right. Getting back into the pattern of everything. The pattern of this larger outside empire coming in and just dominating other war-like cultures and absorbing them didn't really end until after the Roman collapse. After the Romans collapsed, things kind of changed a little bit. You didn't have gigantic empires. You had the Mongols in China, but even that wasn't quite the same. Like after all of that, you had more smaller, like that's when modern city-states and countries started to really develop and be able to defend themselves. So it was a pretty common thing up until at least the collapse of the Roman Empire.
Yeah. I mean, and you can't really say Europe did it with the United States, because it was more of a branch off, and we didn't really absorb Native American culture. We just kind of said, no, we're not doing that.
Yeah, which is very unfortunate.
Unfortunate, yeah, because there's a lot to learn. Because
not that absorbing it would have been the best option either, coexisting,
right.
But still,
it would have been better than just straight, conquer it. But that's not the show for that. We could talk about that another time if you want. But the tablets themselves are actually, like I said, written in Sumerian script. They were distinctively Semitic, which is very interesting. For example, the Hebrew word to write was KTB, which was the same in the tablets. King is Malachim, and man is Adamu. Notice that part right there. That is a amazing point to go on here. Adamu, Adam, man. So the theory that I have in the Old Testament is that Adam is man. It's not one singular person. It represents mankind. Adam is the tender of the garden, if you will. The garden being, mankind as a whole. The resources. The Garden of Eden was just a giant resource. It was to feed outlying nations, and we have that because it says in the Bible that Genesis 1:6, go forth and multiply, and he made humanity, man and woman. And then it talks later on in the Garden of Eden, he makes Adam and Eve, man and woman, man here being Adamu, Adam. So that was interesting to me. I found that to be fascinating because that puts into focus into the video scope, if you will, that the idea of man being Adam is referenced here in these tablets. So, just something to go on. Personal names are in this thing. Michael, Mikailu, meaning who is like El. El being God. When it's capital, it is the Old Testament God. And when it is lowercase, it is your Canaanite gods. It is your Chemosh. It is your Molech. It is your whatever other gods there were. I'm drawing a blank on one of them. But we have El in these tablets. We have that in Hebrew, but in Ebla, it is Mikaya with the Yah replacing the El. Yah becomes prevalent with Yahweh, which is pretty cool, meaning I bring into existence that which exists, which is a pretty cool line there. We also have Esau being Isaum. We have David being Daudum. And we have Saul being Shaulum. And Ishmael being Ishmael. The last part of that meaning El, God, of course. The rest of it meaning has heard me. Now, for those of you that don't know, Ishmael is actually was supposedly the one that started Islam. Like, he branches off, and that part of his lineage is the precursors of Islam. All Abrahamic, because everybody, the father of many nations, Abraham was, as it says in the Old Testament. Some other names that you guys might be interested in are Niya, meaning God has mercy on me. Adam Malik, man of Malik. Il Ha'il, meaning ill is strength or God's strength. And there's so many more, and even Hebrew scholars recognize the similarities to later Hebrew in the Old Testament. So here you have this nation that nobody thought existed. People said that's not real, they don't exist, much like Troy. Boom, a statue's found. Boom, tablets are found. And it's like, one of my favorite things, I think, in reading about this isn't something that I knew about at all at any time. At any time of the research I was doing, whether it was on fallen angels, whether it was Bible, whether it was the Quran, whether it was Middle Eastern history, I never knew about Ebla until probably a month ago. And ever since then, I'm like, yo, this is proving things that we did not know. Like, here is this knowledge and we don't even know about it, and boom, it's dropped in our lap.
Guarantee you that while there's a small fraction of schools that might teach people about Sumeria or anything like that, they might make mention of Mesopotamian civilizations as a whole in history, but they won't probably talk too much about Sumer and Akkad. Guarantee that you would never hear Ebla even once in almost any school you go to today that talks about world history. And it's not necessarily, I mean, who knows? Maybe it is excluded on purpose, or maybe it isn't. Maybe it's just one of those things that was, glossed over. But it's such an interesting thing because there's such a wealth of knowledge. It opened up huge linguistic possibilities. Like Ebla, their civilization is credited now after the fact with basically widespread use of literacy and writing by simplifying the previous languages that existed, like Sumerian and Akkadian and all the other their trade partners, because they had to write in a shorthand to communicate with everybody effectively. So they simplified everything that they did, spread that out, which meant everybody could talk to everybody. And that's huge for something like the ancient world, because you have like stories like the Tower of Babel, all this, and you have stories that explain why nobody speaks the same language. But they were able to accomplish huge things because they were able to communicate with everybody, and they were a very rich nation.
And you're not wrong there. I mean, you have a port nation, and their business was business. It was trade. So they knew all of these locations because there was trade routes. We have incense trade routes. We have frankincense trade routes. We have all of these trade routes that existed. And you have, for instance, we have Hegra and Petra, and we have the Nabateans, and the Nabateans were part of a trade route. And they had this, massive mountain city of Petra, and it was so that people could come in and they could be watched, because it was a narrow gateway to get into Petra, and they knew this. And they did amazing things. They were able to bring water in to a mountainous city and thrive until, of course, Rome comes in, and Rome says, you're part of us now. We are taking you. There's nothing you could do. We are massive. We are a gigantic empire, and you'll either be in the empire or we will just destroy you and you won't be. And they let them still exist. But once you pretty much get taken over and absorbed into a country, it's really, really hard, darn near impossible to regain your foothold as a nation unless that previous nation falls apart. But by then, when it does fall apart, you've been part of it for so long, you started living off of them. You're paying them taxes, you're getting trade from them. And when that dries up, the civilization pretty much went bust. The Nabateans disappeared. Nobody knows where they went. Ebla is pretty much the same thing, because you have the Akkadian Empire, like Spider said. They took Samaria and then they took Ebla. They came in and just said, this is ours. We're taking it. It is now the Akkadian Empire. And there's nothing you can do. You don't have a military empire. And the funny thing about Ebla didn't fall by soldiers. It fell by mercenaries. It fell by hired hands that came in to this vast empire. I mean, it was relatively huge for a Middle Eastern BC era nation, vast, but they did not have the military resources to do anything. I mean, if you don't have a military and somebody comes in with a military and says, listen, I'm taking this. This is mine. I own it. What are you going to do about it? Nothing. You can't do a single solid. What, you're going to fight? You can't hire anybody because you didn't think the invasion was going to happen.
The way it looks like, if you look at it closely, it's almost like they believed, well, we have so many trade deals with everybody that nobody's going to want to make the other trade partners angry by messing with us, so we're safe. But eventually somebody's going to see all that wealth and they're going to be like, you know what? I'm tough enough to take on everybody else too, so I don't care.
Or
it's for me.
Or they just make trade deals with those nations. Say, we'll offer to you cheaper. Boom, you've lost your trade partners. Now they can just come in and take whatever they want.
Yep.
That's it. Yep. Now at Ebla, the ruling king had the Sumerian title N-E-N. The Paleo Canaanite equivalent would be, and this is based on the tablets, Malek, which is virtually the same as the Hebrew word for king in the Old Testament, Melech. Malek and Melech, because it's Malek for the Ebla Tablets, and for the Old Testament, it's Melek. Abu is remarkably close to the word Abba, both meaning father, and that is the father of the Old Testament. But the word Abba itself only appears in the New Testament in Mark, Romans, and Galatians. But Christ is talking about Abba being the Father, being the Old Testament God, unless you go off of the Nag Hammadi aspect of the Old Testament God being this wrathful, vengeful God of just pure disdain who doesn't like humanity. And then Christ comes and he sort of usurps the role of God. So now you have a loving God. That's the Nag Hammadi, and we can get into that. We can do a whole episode on that. Maybe at some point, or maybe I'll do like a religious study. You guys can come in and we'll all talk. That's future plans. Back to it though. Re'ina Adad translates to Adad is our shepherd. Now, where does that sound familiar? Oh, that's right. Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. And then you guys know the rest, but that is very similar. And something to note here is the substitution of El with Yah from that time onwards. Under Ibrim, which was a new settlement in West Semitic regions, the rise of Yah was prevalent. And what do we have with Yah? We have Yahweh, meaning he brings into existence whatever exists. Really sweet definition. That's almost tattoo worthy, but then it'd be kind of cheesy. And I'm like, yeah. And also the word Canaan was found in the tablets, thus indicating that Canaan and Canaanites existed earlier than we thought. Now, if that's the case, we are seeing a civilization that dates back further than we thought, and thus maybe proving the idea that Cain obviously would be the founder of Canaan, Canaanites, seeds of Canaan. We have proof. We're getting documented proof here that the Old Testament was legit, that it's not this whole like it's made up and I don't believe it, and then the truckers, they're not going to believe it either because it'll be dark.
And part of the problem is people will take it, they'll take biblical stuff and they'll take it, oh, this must have been written exactly at the time when all this stuff was happening, but clearly this stuff wasn't happening, so it must be false. But the thing about it is that a lot of the Old Testament is based off of old histories that had been collected and retold and rewritten many times and preserved in such a way that they did their best, honestly, is what it is. They did their best with what they had, and they weren't always literate beforehand. A lot of it was oral stories and eventually got written down. And a lot of the stories, there's more to them than what you just read there. Like the biblical version we have today is super simplified. It leaves out a ton of details.
Yes.
And it makes a lot of it seem like it's just allegory. And some of it is. Some of it is allegory because it's like stories that maybe some philosopher back around the time told. But he might not have made it up. He might have gotten it from a lesson of history that he learned from his parents, his grandparents, his teachers, all that other stuff. And so when you read these books, you have to really kind of look deeper at them, not in a way, it's not like one of those read between the lines, look for hidden messages kind of thing. Because some people are always going, like, I know we've talked about before, there's the so-called Bible code, which may be a thing and maybe it isn't, because a lot of people have written it since the stories began. But if you take that out and just look at it as history, there's a lot of buried history that's not buried on purpose. It's buried over the weight of time. And that's what it is. Like there's so much time that's passed between when the events happened, when it was written down, and when we're reading it today. There's a little bit in there if you do some digging. And it's just, if you dismiss it out of hand, you're doing yourself a disservice. Even if you're not a religious person and you're completely an atheist person, you can approach it from a historical perspective and you can find things that actually happen. You have to kind of go in and do a lot of digging.
Yeah, you really do. You really have to sit down and a lot of cross referencing, a lot of reading religious texts from this religion and also this one, and maybe a third, and then coming into the middle and saying, okay, where are they all similar? And you will have cities, you'll have people, you know, Solomon and in Judaism is Suleiman in the Quran.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a point of two people existing. Now I know people will go that they're both religious texts, so they could have just made it all up. However, when you have something like the Ebla tablets, where it is saying without a doubt these places existed, these people existed, the names Enlil and you know Enki, you know the names that they put in here that have existed before written history. And then you have that, and you're dating things going so far back. Now you're in the third millennium. You're in 3200 BC. You know, you're 4,000 years, roughly 4,000 years removed from that time. 4,000 in this, and overall in the span of history, that is a small time frame. It's a very small time frame. I know those of you out there will say, well, 4,000 years is a long time. It's really not in the span of history. And if we're really seeing that these civilizations keep getting older the more they're digging, what happens when we start digging underneath the old civilizations? 9 times out of 10, you're going to find another civilization. If we go to Cholula, there is a pyramid that is bigger than the pyramids in Egypt, but you can't see it. There's a giant mound covering it, and a church was built on top of this pyramid. And that's the one thing that we see in different places around the world are pyramids. We see them in South America. We see them in China. You can't, though, because they planted trees, so you don't know that there's an actual pyramid there. You don't see it. And then you have mounds, and mounds are everywhere too. And you have ziggurats, which were the precursor to the pyramids. You have all of this knowledge and all of this history, and you are 100%, like my co-host said, if you're not going to sit and read these religious texts, even if you're an atheist, the history, because the Old Testament is basically a history of the Israelite people. It's a history book. It tells you what happened, when it happened, who it happened with. And the funny thing is, like I said, with giants and such, there are so many different books that talk about giants. We had a show about it. I did a presentation on it. There's giants in the ancient world, giants in this world. And it's like, you're doing yourself a very, 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 very disservice by not reading these books. Even if you don't believe in God at all, like he said, if you're an atheist or you're agnostic, if you're that, you're doing yourself a disservice because that's history. You don't have to believe it, but if you read it, you'll understand and be like, okay. But getting back to things here, the number of Old Testament cities mentioned in the tablets are astounding. Astounding. These cities were only known in the first and second millennium records. So we have 2000, 1000 BC of these cities being known and talked about. But with the Ebla tablets, they're finding that they're third millennium. These are third millennium tablets that are talking about cities that a lot of people didn't think existed or were just biblical cities, like they weren't real. Salim, the possible city of Melchizedek, who a lot of people think that Melchizedek was Christ. He was the Old Testament version of Christ who came down just to see how people lived, just to be around people. And there's not a birth record of him, but he is in different parts of the Bible. He's in different places doing different things. So either he is Christ himself, or he's an angel, or he's something, almost like a jinn, if you will. But that's another
Count Saint
show.
Germain.
Count Saint Germain. It's been a while since
Throwback. That's a throwback.
Right. Other cities mentioned: Hazor, Lachish, Megiddo, Gaza, Dor, Sinai, Ashtaroth, named after the pagan god that people worshipped, Joppa in the New Testament, and of course Damascus. However, the biggest prize out of all of this is Urushalima, also known as Jerusalem. This is the earliest known reference to the city itself. The earliest. We're talking 3rd millennium. Jerusalem under another name. Urushalima under another name. Now, I want to point out something too, that Salim, because you have basically Salima, and some people mix them up and say that Salim is another word for Jerusalem. However, Salim's geographic location is unknown, and it is referred to separately from Urushalima, and thus indicating that the two cities were actually not the same city. They were separate. Something else. The two biggest cities, the two biggest sin-filled cities in the Bible, Sodom and Gomorrah, which was on the King's Highway that ran down from Damascus, were also mentioned. And they were part of the cities of the plain from Genesis 14:2. And just so we're clear, the other cities being Admah, Zeboim, and Zor. And there were also dealings with Hittites. And there's even a similar creation story located in the Ebla Tablets. So you have all of this information in these tablets.
It's good stuff. Like, it's amazing just how much is there that corresponds with other different historical references and other semi-historical references. Like, there's a lot of things in there, and most people have never heard of them. Like, the name just doesn't ring any bells for people. People are like, oh, the what, the who, the how,
right? But like you said before, it's buried.
Mm-hmm.
It's buried. It's history that has been buried.
And it's interesting because even little facts like Abraham, who's basically the father of all three of the quote unquote Abrahamic faiths, which is Judaism, right, Christianity, and Islam.
Correct.
Abraham was a Sumerian. He was a citizen of the city Ur.
Yep.
And he left because the city was collapsing. And he was a rich citizen. He had an estate. He took all of his people, all of his soldiers. He had soldiers, trained cavalry soldiers. Took them all, moved them out.
Yep.
And that's the whole reason all of these other religions even exist from him, because he left when things were going bad. And it's just interesting that you look up all this stuff, because you look up Sumerian stuff, they corroborate that he existed.
Yes.
The Bible says he was from Ur.
Yep.
Then you look at Ebla, and it says all these other different cities, and they had dealings with the Sumerians and all this other stuff. And it's just, everything was so interconnected. And it's just a shame that so many connections have been lost in the intervening time. Like, so many years have passed that we've lost all the connections of how everything stacks up, how everybody knew each other. Because the ancient world knew each other a lot more closely than we give them credit for. We assume, oh, they didn't have, of course, they didn't have telephones. They didn't have, messengers like we have. They didn't have a post service. They didn't have this. But even
maybe they did, but it was a different way of doing it. See, we measure what people had by what we have.
Mm-hmm.
So you're like, they didn't have cell phones back then. Duh.
Your dad's not a cell phone.
It's not my dad. I threw it on the ground. But they had, what if they had different ways of communication? What if they lived on the ley lines and they would use the ley lines? There's talk of crazy things happening in the Old Testament, in the Quran, in these and listen, I would understand you guys if you're like, oh, well, that's the Old Testament. It's just didn't happen everywhere. But if you read every religious text, there's always destruction, and it's always the most outrageous destruction you could possibly think of. When we read, it was one of the episodes a while ago, when we talked about I'm trying to remember the name of it. It was an Indian text, the Mahabharata. I think that's how you say it, right?
One of the Vedics.
Yeah, and they talk about nuclear weapons. There's a point in India, Rajasthan, where it's been nuked. Like, there's radioactive that they've measured that goes back very, very far in history. Then you have different places in the Sahara that were glass, that were turned to glass because sand gets hot enough, it turns to glass.
Mm-hmm.
Glass. So you have that. You have the Old Testament that has the destruction. You have all these destructive things happening in this region. But what if they also had the ability to speak to each other? Maybe it wasn't via telephones, or maybe there was like a telephone style system in there that they were like, we have a telephone style system, we can conversate. Nobody knows. People like to say, well, that's impossible. They couldn't have had the same technology we have today. You can't chirp.
Baghdad battery.
Baghdad battery.
That's it. That's it. Like,
that's it.
They had something that generated electricity.
That's it.
It's a half volt or a quarter volt or whatever, but it counts. Come on.
And the pyramids were gold capstones. Gold is one of the best conductors of electricity. Granite bases, conductor of electricity. Underneath water, what is that? A conductor of electricity. It's not rocket science. And they didn't find bodies in the pyramids. For the longest time, they're like, that's the burial tombs. But when they dug these places up, nothing was found. And there's a whole
bodies are in the Valley of the Kings. There's no
Valley of the Kings.
Nobody was buried in any of the pyramids.
King Tut, all that jazz. It was Valley of the Kings. Why do you think it was called the Valley of the Kings? Because that's where they were buried. The pyramids themselves were, in my opinion, of the pyramids, they were the giant electricity conductors and then the aliens. But I don't think it was alien related. I think they just knew how to harness the power of the earth. Stonehenge, built on a ley line, the Vatican, ley line, all these places are on ley lines. And you can say, well, I don't believe in ley lines, but the earth has an energy. And the earth has energy. Whether you believe it or not, the earth has energy. It has to. There, has a core and has electromagnetic waves, and it's, I don't know. I want to get to this last point here before we go off on more tangents, because this is this uncanny tangent. This last part is the part that warms my heart the most out of anything else that we have read. And it just further solidifies where I think this place is. It is interesting to note that the tablets also mention the city Iram of the Pillars, located in Oman, as part of a trading route. This is the only other source outside of Islam and Islamic stories that mentions Iram of the Pillars. No other source does this. Iram of the Pillars is mentioned in the Quran. It's mentioned in the 1001 Arabian Nights. It's mentioned in I can see the book. I've got it. It's Tales of the Marvelous and Strange. But those are all Islamic points of view. There's nothing outside of that until these tablets came out and they said, yes, there is an Iram of the Pillars. And they said the pillars were mighty, that the city was mighty, that it was huge. So, people can say all they want, well, it didn't exist and it was just this. But why is there this giant part in the desert, the empty quarter? And there was a guy recently that had shot it from, somehow he was able to see it from space, or they were somehow able to pinpoint where it could have been. And then there's markings of a giant city. And then all of a sudden the Ebla tablets come and boom, proof. Like, come on, we can no longer ignore these places, these things, these people as if they're ghosts and myths, because you're gonna find that there's gonna be logical proof that these places existed. And when I read this and saw that this is not Islamic at all. This would predate Islam, because I believe Islam was what, BC AD type thing. I don't think it was that old. This predates Islam as far. You know what? I gotta check this. Because I gotta know.
Well, because Islam is the newest of the three Abrahamic faiths. It's the most recent as far as, at least as far as widespread acceptance. You had Judaism, then you had Christianity, and then Islam came afterwards. Although historically there could have been seeds of it sooner, but as far as established as an official.
So 622 AD. 622 AD. AD. Let me make sure here. I want to make sure that I'm on point with what I'm saying here. Let's see. Hold on. I gotta see my timeline. It's an AD religion or a CE, depending on if common era. They did that for whatever reason. I don't know. It's not, I can grab it or, move between both, but come on now. 622 AD. Come on, man. We're talking 32. We're talking 3000 BC. We're talking, 2000 some odd year. We're talking, 2000 some odd years before Islam. And this city gets mentioned. Come on, man. Like, stop. Just stop it.
Stop it.
Just stop it. That means that Iran existed for a time period. And then Islam comes in, boom, it's gone. The Thamud, the people, boom, Islam comes in, gone. What if Islam had a weapon of some kind? Or what if they were able to do something and turn a whole city in, because they opened up a sinkhole and the whole thing collapsed into the sinkhole. It was basically eaten. They say Allah opened the earth and it caved in. Winds came, storms came, all this, and then it ends up sinking into the ground. And how are you going to find it? We're going to take a shovel and go out there and start digging. Good luck. God bless. But I think I could find it. I don't need a shovel, but I think I could find the city. I have an idea of where it's located. I've done a lot of research and enough to pinpoint kind of where it's located. I'm not going to tell nobody. I'm not telling nobody. I know, but I'm not going to tell nobody. I'll tell my co-host, but it won't be around cell phones or anything that can record. Because I'll say this. If this city is found, it would damn near turn archaeology upside down. A lot of people think, well, it wouldn't hit that hard. Find this city proves multiple things. It proves the existence of giants without the shadow of a doubt. Existed in the ancient times. It would prove Iran where the pillars existed. And it would also prove that there was desert civilizations. So maybe the desert wasn't as desert as they'd like to believe, and it was a little bit more fertile. Antarctica, another place that they say was a fertile place. I don't know. You guys would have to tell us. But like I said, these tablets, this should have turned archaeology upside down, but it didn't. It just kind of came in and was gone, because like I said, we've done enough research between the two of us. Me and my co-host have done a copious amount of research between different avenues, but I don't think, he says he might have heard of it. I've never heard of it. That's how you know. If you have to say those two things, it's not as widely known. I mean, it might be, and we might just be behind the curve. We might not be, we might be behind everything. But we have done an ample amount of research that I feel like I would have known this. This is something I would have known. This is something you would have known. And the fact that we didn't know about this, well, I don't know when you learned it because you told me you might have.
It would have been a ways back. It's been so long that I had to look it up again for the show when you suggested the topic. So if that tells you anything, it's not a recent thing that I've looked into, which means that, again, if I've looked into it before, it's who knows when.
And that's the thing, like, how important was it when you looked it up? Did you just gloss over it? I don't mean that negatively. Possible. I don't mean that negatively, mind you.
And, that gets into almost like a whole other show eventually, because that gets into the potential paranormal aspect of knowledge that's hidden on purpose in a way that when you read it, it just goes in and goes out.
Yep.
And it doesn't sit right, because there's been a lot of stories about that over the years. People will read things that are verifiable fact. A week later, a month later, they can't remember it all, and it has no impact. It could be something earth-shattering, something completely super, like, really, oh man, I had this great epiphany, and then it's completely gone. And it's not just our brains getting screwed up. People say it could be curses. It could be protected information somehow. It could be Illuminati rituals. Who knows? But, I've heard it before, and that's interesting, because I wouldn't have thought about that until we had this show tonight and brought it back up, and then that kind of stuck in the back of my head, like, oh, protected knowledge.
Yeah. I mean, that's what happens. Well, this was a nice heavy show. Like, it was like a nice heavy meal. There's a lot of information to take in. I hope you guys enjoy it. I hope you guys enjoy it tomorrow. Whenever you get a chance to listen to it, listen to it. It's good stuff. It's good for your brains. We're here for your brains. All right, remember that. But we're not zombies because we're not eat your brains. We're here to put information in it. We're here to open your head, put the information in, stir it like we're stirring the pot, and then close the head, and then go about your business. That's it. Anyways, it's that time, folks. We appreciate everybody tuning in. Love you guys. You guys are freaking awesome. Keep on being awesome. And as always, why be boring when you can be uncanny? We will see you folks next week. Peace.